Patrick, your book couldn't be timelier given the worldwide attention to the use of surveillance, big data, how government and corporations are really keeping track of a lot of what we do. I think your book adds an important dimension to the discussion that many civil libertarians are having about how this impacts our privacy. I wanted to mention something you wrote early on in the book, that we instinctively trust local government as the provider of information during an emergency, even when it's an emergency that we're directly involved in. Call 911 and ask for services, wait for someone to come to where you are and tell you what's happening. You write, this is an inefficient way to collect and distribute information during a time of crisis. And you say how we trust those in authority to have more information than we do. The information that we get from government is heavily filtered. It's late in arriving. Is there a strategy you can describe in making the shift from trusting those in authority to relying on our friends and our colleagues for information?
I still think that we should trust people in positions of authority during times of emergency. It's just that the method of information dispersal at this moment in time is not nearly as efficient as it could be, especially considering that you're talking about a population that's carrying around a television station in their pocket at all times. And that's really the problem. So what sort of clued me on to how efficient it could be was a conversation that I had with an entrepreneur named Gordon Jones, and he made an app called Guardian Watch. He was a former firefighter, and Guardian Watch app works like this. You just sort of take your phone in a time of emergency, and you're able to take a picture of what you see. It's sent to a central location, and then that can be distributed across everybody who might be affected by that situation. And it actually has a couple of competitors right now. So compare that to the way we deal with emergency communication today, which is a lot of people all of a sudden turning to one information source that's relying on whatever data it can get to relay information from a distance. I mean, it's just fundamentally an inefficient way to deal with giving everybody the information that they need to make a decision in that moment. And that's because we're communicating in that situation in sort of an analog format. There's, a bunch of people are talking to a central emergency sort of regulator, and they're speaking at the speed at which we speak, and then that centralized sort of information distributor is speaking back at a slow rate. And information, we know now, comes in a variety of different forms, not just spoken word. So you get much more information from a picture than you do from like literal instruction. And what we have the capacity to do now is A, collect visual information in times of emergency, and also distribute visual information in times of emergency, and really cut out the middleman, the person or the central agency that's in charge of cognifying all this incoming data and then representing it in a way that maybe helps the largest number of people, but given the limitations of being text. So this is just an example to me of how we've reached a really new and critical point where we create much more information in all that we do than we did previously, and that changes the tools we have in decision making.
You talk about something called the Internet of Things.
Right.
What is that?
So the Internet of Things really refers to sort of what we're seeing right now, where we're embedding computational capabilities more and more into our lived environment. Some technologists disagree on this, but I personally consider the smartphones that we all carry around with us, or at least 70% of the American population carries around with us, to be a trademark example of the Internet of Things. We are becoming human sensors because we're all carrying around an extremely powerful computer in our pocket. But it also takes the form of different sensors that exist in the physical world around us. It takes the form of radio frequency identification readers that we pass underneath when we access Easy Pass on the New Jersey Turnpike. It takes the form of weather sensors that are all around us. Certainly surveillance and cameras that collect data and then send that somewhere else. This is all part of the Internet of Things. It's basically the embedding of computers into our real world. Now the idea comes from a guy named Mark Reiser, who worked at Xerox PARC in the 80s. And he envisioned a future where when you interacted with computers, it's very different from the way we interact with them now, where we sit down at a desk, the thing is facing us, we take out our hands, and we start creating data with our fingers by typing it directly and shoving it into the computer. Instead, he imagined a future where we interacted with computers passively all of the time through our actions. And so the presence of technology actually sort of retreated from our life. We didn't feel it the same way we do now. And this is the future that we're just now beginning to sort of walk into as computation becomes smaller, more powerful, less expensive, and more ubiquitous. And that's the Internet of Things.
Now, you talk about issues of privacy and how one of the answers to, in essence, protecting our privacy is for us to get a hold of our data.
Right.
And I wonder, with so much just coming out in terms of how data aggregators like Axiom, TRW are collecting our information, it's a commodity to them.
Right.
They want to hold on to it. How do we make that transition to getting access and owning our data?
Well, it is a commodity that they use, but it's also something that we create. We are the point of origin for this data. So Axiom is a good example. Axiom partners with your phone carrier, be it Verizon or AT&T, most likely. Partners with your phone carriers. It's one of those two. When you walk around, you create information about where you are, and that information, locational data, and locational data speaks to a lot of different things about you. If you're at a particular place at a particular time, this suggests you're sort of a particular person, and you can be lumped in with a lot of other people that have that characteristic. Now, Axiom then connects with different companies that are trying to sell you stuff on the basis of who you are and where you are. Now, there are privacy laws that say they can't market to you like explicitly and specifically. They can't use your name, and so all of that information that your carrier gets and sends to Axiom is quote-unquote anonymized. So really identifying information is removed, but that's sort of a nominal consideration, considering how easy it is to de-anonymize that information. So it's only because they're trying to pay attention to this privacy law that you're not explicitly marketed to in terms of exactly who you are, but they do want this sort of category tagging to be as specific as possible. They really want to narrow down on the smallest group of people possible to reach with the most specific advertising, and do that at scale over and over and over again. It's gross and it's weird and we hate it. Having said that, like I said, you are the point of origin for this data, and there's lots of different ways you can understand what they see when they look at you. For one thing, you can download a couple of different apps to just sort of log your location and just take a look at your activities so that you understand in a way that's much more conscientious where you've been, where you went, what you did there, and what that might say about you. Because you're a better judge of yourself than really anybody else. It's just nothing that we think of paying attention to anymore. And there are a number of apps that you can use and a number of services that you can use to sort of understand where you fit among other people in terms of your demographic profile. But most importantly, when you make a decision about what you want to buy, what you may buy, or what you might not want to buy, just keep in mind that all of those decisions can be remembered by someone somewhere. And at some point, it'll get out to you, perhaps in the form of marketing. And so you might feel empowered by that, you might not feel empowered by that, but if you remember those interactions where you're directly marketed to, and there are services that you can subscribe to that help you with that as well, then you've taken a first step in protecting yourself from really coercive marketing that targets you based on context, based on where you are and what you're doing.
I think that until the revelations recently by Edward Snowden, many people didn't realize the extent to which the government partners with private industry in collecting, storing, and ways that we don't yet know really how they may use our data. Do you think that those revelations have contributed to raising awareness of some of the things you talk about in your book, how we can possibly use data to improve public safety, public health? Was this a good development?
I think this was absolutely a good development. The revelation, I'm not exactly sure what to make of Edward Snowden as a person, and I'm not able really to comment on whether or not he should face charges. I think that's sort of up to someone else. But the revelation itself is probably good. I'm sort of in